From consumer goods to media and entertainment, Sudhanshu Vats has run companies that rely on deep consumer insight and engagement in order to thrive. As the group CEO of Viacom 18 that runs TV channels like Colors and MTV and has backed films like Bahag Milka Bhag and Queen, he's in the best position to deconstruct the kind of opportunities that this sector provides to young professionals. He's also going to share some of the learnings he's had from his own career path. Sudhanshu, first question, for a professional manager who's moved from the consumer goods sector to media and entertainment, what would you highlight as the key differences in these two sectors for a professional manager?
I think the fundamental difference is the pace at which media and entertainment as a sector moves, Anuradha. So I think therefore, so while the common piece is consumer insight and telling stories, so I think you are telling stories and through advertising in a consumer products company, and you are telling stories here, which is all your content in one form or the other, whether it's your 30-minute serial or a 120-minute feature film. That is common, but the pace at which the business moves and the pace of change which is happening is enormous, I think. So therefore, that is what is a fundamental difference in media and entertainment.
If the FMCG industry moves, the pace of change in the FMCG business is X, what would it be for the media and entertainment industry?
So if it is X, if I was to hazard a guess, I would say at least 5x, at least 5x. And I think the other thing about media and entertainment as industry is that the number of external variables with which you are sort of, you come in contact with or which are shaping this industry is extremely high. So for instance, telecom is shaping this industry as to how this moves forward. Electronic handheld gadgets are shaping this industry as to how it is consumed. So therefore, that is extremely high compared to a FMCG product where if you look at a soap and a shampoo and a detergent, the use for it is reasonably consistent over a long period of time for hundreds of years to centuries. So I think, that's what you do. But here, how you consume this product, how you consume this content, where it is available, how it will be made, how is it transmitted, what are the pipes available, what are the screens available, is changing and changing. The pace of change is only gathering momentum as we go forward. So I think that's
also, I'm curious about the fact that in the FMCG business, you would be reaching out to the consumer directly. They pay literally for what you have to sell. Whereas here, people don't pay directly for what you have to sell. And, actually, they don't even really pay for what you have to sell. It's the advertiser. So it's an interesting relationship. It's a relationship with two stakeholders where one pays and the other sort of gives you viewership for which the other pays, right?
So you're absolutely right. So I think it is a B2C industry, as much as a B2C industry can be, media and entertainment. But I think the business models are more B2B. So they tend to rely on another intermediary, in a manner of speaking, like in our case here, advertising. But that also is partly correct, Anuradha. I think, for instance, if you look at parts of the world which you're fully familiar with, as you know, I think a lot of subscription incomes come from the consumer, maybe through an aggregation model, which was the earlier piece in cable piece. But as you go digital, a lot of it will come directly from the share of wallet of the consumer. So having said that, it will remain, considerable chunk will remain B2B, but there will be a B2C chunk as well. And in entertainment, again, if you look at, if you look at entertainment totally holistically, the consumer products end of the business of entertainment, the experiential business of entertainment, which is events and all that, there is still direct share of wallet of the consumer as well. So I think
that is something that is going to change. It's going to be more direct interaction and payment from the consumer.
Yes.
When you look at this business from the perspective of human resources, in terms of the kind of talent you need and the kind of jobs that there are, can you explain what it is that this industry needs? And again, how is it different from, let's say, what FMCG would need or telecom would need?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, so this is, in my judgment, this is an industry which is, which will need a lot of people because it is a people-centric, people-specific, people-intensive industry. So I think, therefore, it's all about people, frankly. And it's growing rapidly. I personally feel it is the next big sunrise sector for a country like India. I also feel we have a global advantage here because we are unlikely to compete directly with the other big country, which which we do for every other thing. So because in India is a free country and freedom of speech and all that should all help us. Now the tricky piece when it comes to human resources is, do you have any formal training, and do you have enough schools? Of course you have a few, FTII, which has been in news very recently quite a lot. There are some others as well. So there have been schools which are there, but do you have, first of all, sufficient number of schools? Two is the fundamental question, do you actually need schools for some of this, or is it learned more on the job? And is this the part of swimming you learn when you are thrown into the deep end? That is the second piece. The third piece is, having said all of this, how do you bring in some amount of objectivity and some amount of professionalism, and as is the question you asked, for the people who come in, and how do you value this? And because everybody thinks he or she has a story. Everybody thinks he or she is a journalist, man of speaking today. He or she is a programmer. But having said that, I think each of these is, in my judgment, a very specialized field. There are people who will be good at it. There are others who will not be as good at as this thing. How do we find out as organizations? How do we staff? Where do we look for this talent? And so those questions are there.
So let's take the 3 points you mentioned. So the first bit, or the first supply source, is formal education and institutes that do that. How do you evaluate what you're getting in the job market? How do you evaluate the talent that's coming out?
So actually, I think some of our leading institutes in this, over a period of time, have actually had good talent which has come out, if I was to reflect back, especially over a long period of time. So if you were to look at many of the FTII grads are people who you can look up to in those fields, frankly, to be honest with you. Having said that, I think there aren't enough. That's first issue. And number two, I think the way we are going about it, to give you an example, at Viacom 18 is a program which is now about 3 years old, which we started, which we call a creative training program, creative trainee program. What we there do is, rather, we go to normal schools. So we go to an Ahilya Bai, we will go to a Xavier's, we will go to a Stephens, we will go to whatever, some of these, and we basically, and even some of the schools in Northeast, because I think there's a lot of talent, personally, if you ask me, particularly in the area of music in Northeast. So what we then do is, there we basically try and look at mechanisms where we understand people's ability to write, their ability to tell stories, and we try and pick up youngsters based on recruitment methodology, which is partly learned but partly homegrown, where we basically do a lot of work with them. So it's a one-day kind of engagement, after which we get to see 2 or 3 people. And now we have, every year we hire close to about 10 odd creative trainees year on year, and I think that's working out very well. When I interact with them, I find them very I find them really talented, extremely talented, very wise for that age, when I reflect when I was at that age, and ability to multitask, ability to bring fresh ideas, ability to question the status quo. I think that's working well. But I think therefore we are spreading out. We are going to, because my own judgment is that some of it cannot be taught, may not be taught. And two, we do not have sufficient number of schools as well at this moment. So what happens is, you let people come in and jump into the deep end, learn as they go along. However, one thing which would be useful is, as they join an organization and learn, during the process of working with us, can they continue to strengthen themselves? Can they continue to build themselves and embellish skills which they may need as they grow? Because that's the piece which will become important as we go.
So you see online education, courses that let you learn as you earn, all of this is having value, especially if it's customized and tailor-made to your industry's needs.
Yes, I definitely see. Because if you have to create, frankly, to be honest with you, I'm saying, even if I take this first at a macro level and bring it to media and entertainment, but if you look at macro level, if India is to create about whatever, 12 million jobs, 1 million job a month is what they say, or whatever, even higher. And if that has to be done, we don't have educational institutions which can match that at any level, private or public. Even if we try and start building those today, by the time we catch up, it will take about, minimum a decade, or at least 5 years. So I think we don't have, whereas the youngsters are ready today, whereas the industries are expanding today and companies are ready to hire them. So I think it's our ability to take more raw talent and shape and hone that talent and shape it is where basically where both industry ourselves as a company will have to play a role, which is lot more on the job, but we'll rely more on online education, as you said, or learning as you are working kind of methodologies as we go forward, and that'll be very useful. And fortunately, the hunger which is there in the youngsters and the time available with them and their ability to make 48 hours and 24 hours is amazing. The amount of work which they can put in. So I think they have the capacity to do it. I think we just need to find the avenues for them to.
And I sort of keep going back to FMCG, but because the 20 years you've spent there are invaluable, and you have focused while you were there on education and the talent supply to your company at that time. So the question is that online education, given that the media and entertainment industry is seemingly more chaotic, more disorganized, less process oriented, would it therefore be even more valuable than, let's say, in the FMCG space where you go to MBAs,
Yes.
no matter what level of institute?
Yes. No, it will be even more valuable without doubt, Anuradha, because I'll tell you one thing. While, and I keep saying this again, over and over again, while media and entertainment is a very dynamic industry, it's a very fast-paced industry, that does not mean that media and entertainment does not require planning. That does not mean it does not require preparedness. That does not mean that it does not require managing networks. We actually do need to manage networks. We do need to, because 80% or between 70 to 80% of our output has to be based on the planned output. There is, of course, 20% which may be, which may be more on the go or on the fly, but balance has to be planned. Of course, we may need to, depending on the pace of change, we may need to plan, we may need to compress certain plans. What happens elsewhere in 2 years maybe needs to happen here in 3 months. What happens elsewhere in 10 years needs to happen here in 1 year. But we do need that 1 year plan and the 3-month plan and maybe a 2-year plan equivalent to a 20-year, 10-year, 5-year elsewhere. And you do need to plan. And I think that's important. I think that's
You mentioned that the pace of change in this business is really much faster than many other businesses. So one of the key changes is the fact that it's a digital world. You reference screens, how consumption patterns are changing. So there are challenges on on the technology front, on the monetization front, on the IPR front, all fronts. But what would you say are the opportunities that this digital world is putting forward to companies like yours, and by extension to people who want to make careers with you?
So I think the opportunities for a company like us is, I think, with digital, the amount of data which we could have as a company would be of a very different order. And I think there is a lot of richness in that data, and a classic Netflix example which you are aware of. But if you take anything which we do, I think if we can capture that data and know at a granular level what my viewer is watching, what is his tastes, and what are, not only in the area of viewership, I can build a complete ecosystem around my viewer, what he or she does, what he or she likes, what he or she shops for, how he or she spends the spare time, and so on and so forth. I think that information will be hugely valuable, not only for specific content, but otherwise as well. So that's one big thing. I think from the point of view of people who want to come in digital, I think the opportunity it opens up is, I think digital is the first place where art will perhaps meet science in a real form. So I think media and entertainment is a business about telling stories, which is art in a manner of speaking. But I think the science it will bring with it, with analytics, and I'm a firm believer of it, is what we can marry the two to take it to the next level. And I think that's what would be very, very useful. And for the youngsters outside who want to look at opportunities here, especially from a digital point of view, I think in analytics there is huge opportunity. And maybe certain youngsters who can combine left and right very well, this would be the best opportunity for them as well. So therefore, their ability to look at a little bit of look at things scientifically, at the same time, build in stories and tell stories. And I think more and more I'm seeing now youngsters who are a little bit more balanced, who are not sort of totally in for science. At the same time, they are also not only arts in this manner of speaking. So that is again great place where it will offer an opportunity.
Tell me, when you say data analytics and you just said that you see a great use of data analytics in this business. What role does it play in building creative or content brands? Because the data analytics can also, you have so much data that it can also give sort of build in too much caution, because you're going with that data and such rich data.
Correct. No, I think we've got to be careful with data analytics that it does not bog you down, and you don't become a slave of data. To be honest with you, that's not the purpose. I think when we look at data analytics, and also we need to also find out the interface or user interface for smartly using data, and therefore I've now been currently being sort of looking at visualization as an important technique in using data, and therefore what happens is it visually tells you the story which you want to hear, and it also visually uses data at the back end and depicts things which you may want to see. So let me give you an example. Someone was recently sharing with me a lot of work they've done on Mahabharata, which is one of our biggest, so arguably the tallest story in India, in a manner of speaking. So there, if you look at it, the amount of work they have done, and this is just the scripture. So this is not about any Mahabharata which has been made or whatever. This is Mahabharata, the scripture. What they have done is they have taken the characters. Who all are the characters? Which characters are close to whom, and what are the level of interactions of the characters in different stories, and so therefore, and through data, I'm saying, rather just guess who was closest to Draupadi and farthest. This is based on data analytics now. So closest to Draupadi is Nakul, and farthest to Draupadi is Arjun.
Really?
And as much as you like. So because this is based on the story, the way it has been written, exactly looking at the story, the number of interactions they've had, what are this, basically the original story. And then another thing which you also then look at is what happens in certain sequences which you do day to day. So to be honest with you, it also allows you to dial up things. So if you look at today, we use the data available today through the measurement agencies in India to sort of look at the dynamics in different scenes and to see how we improve that. The same can be done this is currently done by using more Excel sheets, and it's done more tactically, if I can use the word. What analytics will allow you to again look at what kind of interactions within this story are likely to get more eyeballs or have got historically better eyeballs. And therefore, what needs to be developed as we go forward. And therefore, your ability to develop stories which are based on this goes up. I think this is the same. So therefore, again, to give you a very good example, one of the works which has been done is still being done in research in Silicon Valley, is to understand why do kids, when kids start speaking, what are the first words they say? And why do they say? Is it instinctive, anecdotal, or can it be programmed? Or is there any data to support that? And where do they pick up stuff? So for instance, if you look at water, and they have now done their study over a period of 3 years through cameras. And this is just to sort of illustrate what all it can do. It's not necessarily what we'll do on day to day, but what it can do. And so therefore there they have again seen peaks and troughs of what are the things. So, and very obvious stuff, some of them. So for instance, you would see kids' ability to react to water or to use the word water would be maximum in places where the water is in a house. So therefore, it's a lot more in kitchen and in bathroom, in a manner of speaking. So similarly, and I think so therefore those interactions, what they say, how they say, so the ability to use data analytics in content is amazingly high. And surprisingly, whatever little I have seen in my organization, the content guys are hungry for that piece. So most of my key content people are saying, wow, when can I see this and get this? So these are not numbers, these are trends, these are visuals, but this give them the indication on how to progress the story, who will talk to what, and that kind of stuff. So
but do you see this kind of, I can completely see the virtue of this kind of data and what kind of possibilities it can help creative people, sort of grapple with. But at the same time, do you think it may come in the way of absolutely pure creative thought because you're already working within a framework? Yeah. It's limiting you in that sense.
So I think, so I'll tell you how I would look at it. I think if you look at it, first of all, the primacy will continue to be for the creative piece and for the story. And that should remain pristine and that should not be interfered with. But if you listen to a story, basically, which is, let's say, it's when let's say the story could be a book of 200 pages. It could be a story of, let's say, five pages or whatever. The story will always continue to be the most important thing. Now the trick is, how do I successfully convert this story and with reasonable level of, or with highest level of integrity, into a serial, into a film? And how do I dial up the probability of success of this beautiful story into a script, a series or fiction series, or into a film? That is where I think analytics will come into play in expounding it. It won't build stories. It's unlikely to build stories for you. But it'll tell you who are the best kind of directors you could look at it, what are the actors, what are the things people want, if this is the kind of story, who's the best actor. Now today we use a lot of this through either simple analytics or data or judgment. So we do this day in, day out. It's not that you haven't, you say, who will suit this role? I think that's a very obvious kind of question, right? Now, one is that you only rely on a judgment. Two is you bolster that judgment with some amount of data analytics to be sort of sure that what you're taking is good. And it will allow you to take bigger bets. See, one of the biggest issue with India is we now currently are making 100,000 hours of programming. I personally feel original content, 100,000 hours. I personally feel that's a little too much. I think we may perhaps be, instead of making 100,000 hours of average content, and pardon me for using that word, should we be making 50,000 hours or 20,000 hours of, or at least 50,000 hours of which about 10,000 hours is quality content? Should we also be telling not necessarily just culture stories but universal stories? And for us to tell universal stories, we will need to rely on not only judgment but data as well. So I think, that's, and to be able to tell it to the world. So I think that's where it will come into play.
So I think what I'm hearing is that there is a big role to play, but you also need to understand how to use it and not sort of go overboard either in accepting it completely or rejecting it totally. Yes. Also in the movie business, which is so high risk, it helps, this kind of data will help you deal with, will get you greater efficiencies. Is that the way to look at it?
Yeah, I think in the movie business, again, analytics will have a role to play in 2 or 3 areas. Let me first talk at the content level and then maybe a little bit at exhibition level and so on and so forth. But if you look at content piece first, I think where it will help, Anuradha, is that if you have your movies, so for instance, if you were able to predict with some amount of certainty the output of the film at the theatre, and even a band, it's likely to be a band, it will be a good start. And assuming you get it 60 or 70% right, maybe 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, which is what you would, perhaps, you will not get it 100% right. But that band will then allow you to use budgets which are perhaps right. And as they say in movie business, films don't fail, budgets do. So where analytics will come in, it will help you to sort of get the budget right. You don't let the budget fail. If you don't let the budget fail, then the films don't fail in that sense, and it will make the industry healthy. One of the fundamental issues with film industry today is that there are far too many films who lose money. Actually, over 90% of the films lose money. That is not sustainable for an industry. And no wonder that the industry is small in India as you look at it. It will only grow when we start making money and deploy it back into the industry. And I think that will happen if you use analytics from a storytelling point of view, from a better fit, from a casting and director point of view, also from exhibition. I think it's got enormous potential in exhibition. If you look at it, analytics again can come into play for medium-sized budget films or small films. You have to choose the number of screens you need to go to. This is not a problem for big films. So big films carpet bomb, so they'll go to 4,000 screens, so you go to every screen, frankly. But where you got to choose which screens to go to, again, analytics can come into play, that a film like this, what are the better screens I need to go to? So suppose in Bombay, how many screens should I have? And within Bombay, therefore, where these screens should be positioned for different small films of different genre, should some of these screens be more accentuated towards, let's say, so South Bombay kind of place, or are they more in North Bombay, or are in the central suburbs? What is the other thing which comes in is also where are you scheduling these screens? So what timing is important depending on what kind of audience will go in. That's another piece which will come in. Finally, analytics can play a big role for exhibitors, again from the point of view of pricing. If you look at it, because we can make pricing really dynamic. Because the biggest paradox in India is underscreened. Yeah. As you know, there are 8 screens to a million people in India. But at the same time, our capacity utilization is 37%. So if we are underscreened, why is our capacity utilization so low? And is there a role to play as well? I think it could be partly content also. But what is the role price is playing? Am I making pricing far more flexible and dynamic? So I keep it high on weekends, on week one, but then I drop it. And do I drop it more? Do I drop it more in one part of the city and less in another part of the city on one day, less on second day? I think you can do a lot of that stuff.
Sudhanshu, I'm going to shift focus a bit. So the thing is that you are so, I can see the excitement, like it's oozing out of everything you say about this new business that you've been working in for the last 3-4 years. What was it for you personally to make the shift from FMCG to media and entertainment? Personally, now I'm not interested in what the companies are doing and all of that, but what kind of an adjustment was it for you?
If you look at the shift when I took, so I had spent about 20 years with Hindustan Unilever at that time, outstanding company. I was doing well in the organization, and so therefore I was quite well settled. And there was this question of then sort of unsettling myself. So when I was moving on, there was of course this a little bit of anxiety / fear as to would I be able to adjust in a totally different environment, and that was without doubt there. But I think there was a reassurance that having spent about 20 years with the Indian consumers and having traveled, thanks to Hindustan Unilever, the length and breadth of the country, with consumers in the marketplace, I think that understanding of the country and understanding of the marketplace and of the consumer I thought was the most valuable gift of levers to me more than anything else, and what sort of, and that is something which is precious and remains with me, whichever industry I go into. And that is very useful for this industry as well, frankly. The second area I also thought is that media and entertainment per se was getting into a phase which is, I think, now into where we will need to grow it in a more professional fashion. And I think the heady first decade where, you did whatever you liked, and everything you did worked, was perhaps changing, where you need to perhaps be careful of what you need to do, and you need to bring in, so you do need to take risks in this business, but you need to measure those risks a little better. So bringing in a little bit of method to the madness is where I thought I would be able to add value as well. So I think those are the pieces, and personally I'm a big India fan, rather, and therefore, opportunity to continue to stay in India was a very big driver. And so with Unilever, there was an option of moving out then, and from a family perspective, everyone, so it worked extremely well in that sense for me.
You've credited Hindustan Unilever for a lot of the learnings that you have as a professional today. Why is this company seen as the crucible that from where CEOs for the rest of Indian industry emerge? What is it in the DNA there that creates CEOs for most Indian industry?
I think it's difficult to describe a formula or a recipe, but I think what worked for Hindustan Unilever, or continues to work for them to a very large extent, is ability to hire really high quality talent. Thereafter, run this talent through difficult assignments and make them learn a lot on the ground. And therefore, it's the systems and processes which have got developed, starting from the leadership training, which is now called, business leader trainees or whatever, used to be called management trainees when we had joined, and what you go through. So I think the learnings which one had when we were staying for 2 months in a village in Eta are something you cannot, no school teaches you that, that's the issue. The learning which you have when you are traveling and doing your TSI stint, which is the base salesman level stint, you're moving around in jeeps and local buses and interacting with people. When you are talking to Kirana stores, I think your ability to interact to the grassroots level India is something which very few companies can offer to give you. And to top it all, then there is a very systematic program to develop people and allow them to learn as they work in this company. I think that's another piece, because for me, continuing to learn while working is important, and I think very few companies offer that opportunity as well. So I think, and they bring in a more systematic learning, project-based learning, on-the-job learning, and it's a combination of all of that which continues to grow you as, and no wonder that you sort of build leaders.
So if you were to advise somebody starting out their career on how much they should plan their career, what would you say? Would you say that you have to be very clear about your goals and then work towards them? And is it really that much in an individual's control?
This is a difficult question, but I think, and it will vary from people to people, but my own view is, I think having some amount of clarity for a short to medium period is a good idea. Thereafter, the change is so rapid now that sort of thinking on what it will be 20 years out may be difficult. But what would you like to do for the first 1 year and first 3 years is something which one should think through. And my view is that primacy, what I leave one message with the youngsters, that in the initial phase of their career, they should give a lot of primacy to learning and to where you are, what opportunities to learn you will have, what is the kind of industry you are in, and what will be your peer group, because you learn a lot from that in an organization. And that is critical. After that, I think once you, and therefore the focus should be on making oneself a better professional and hopefully a better person, and thereafter it sort of follows as you go along. And I think there are many things which
what is your method of dealing with frustration or failure at the workplace? So we know that you're a marathon man and you run marathons, but is there anything that you do outside of your workplace that actually helps you cope with all the stress that this really absolutely fluid workplace today in India can offer?
So I think a couple of things, Anuradha. One, you rightly pointed out, I think running is therapeutic for me. So I run, and that 1 hour is my hour, or maybe 2 hours when I practice, especially for my marathons. I also run without music, so it's basically, so I'm just sort of, and many times all on my own, many times with a small group as well. So I think when you keep chatting, but otherwise, so that's very important. That really helps. I do a little bit of yoga and meditation as well, but otherwise these are the two key things. The most important thing for me in terms of managing stress is to actually, whenever there is an issue, I give primacy to the issue. And I also would like to have then a conversation, an honest conversation. I've always seen, if you have a frank and honest conversation on any issue which is there, and we don't allow that issue to fester unnecessarily, it helps hell of a lot. So I think that's what works for me.
Sudhanshu, thank you very much for sharing all the learnings, and all the very best.
Thank you. Thanks. I'd like to take this opportunity to compliment UpGrad for entering this area of education. Education is very close to my heart. I personally feel education is transformational, and I've personally been a beneficiary of high quality education. I also would like to tell the youngsters today that education is not necessarily about the school you go to, and also does not stop when you come out of your, let's say, the school, the grad or the post-grad, whatever we'd like to call it. I think it's a continuous process. It's a process where we learn all the time. We learn on our jobs, we learn through sort of our peers, or we learn through our superiors, through our subordinates. I think UpGrad will give you an opportunity to sort of reflect on and learn in a more systematic fashion certain things which you may have left out when you were doing your formal education, if I was to use the word, and you think you may need it as you go forward in your careers, or in the job you want to do, or in the business you would like to do, your own or someone else's. I think, to me, the key message therefore is it's a fantastic opportunity. These kind of opportunities did not exist when we were growing up. Make all the use of it. And India is a great country to be in, because there is so much to be done here. The more we learn, the more we will be able to impart learning to others, and collectively we'll be able to grow this fascinating country of ours. All the very best. Thank you.